Thanks for saying that.
It's 6 p.m. We'll call the meeting to order. And first of all, I wanted to note for the record that Brenna is absent and excused. And then I will begin with the land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge that we gather on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the Nooksack tribe, who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin throughout the San Juan Islands and the North Cascades watershed from time immemorial. On behalf of everyone here, we want to express our deepest respect and gratitude for our Indigenous neighbors, the Nooksack tribe, for their enduring care and protection of our shared lands and waterways.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of the agenda. Any changes from the written agenda?
Not as from the written agenda, but a late addition. So just want to make sure that all the board members saw
So
that.
the late,
A late addition is action item C, which is a resolution on our fuel bid process.
to rebid?
Yes.
Okay. I
And then,
entertain a motion to approve the agenda as written here.
and did you want to make a change?
No. Yeah, thank
Motion to approve the agenda is written.
you. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Public comments. Natalie here, so. Well, at any rate, we'll move on from public comments to good of the order.
Yeah, I just have a couple things. I first wanted to introduce our new student services director, Stephen Dahl. So you can put a face to the name. You're going to be seeing and hearing from him a lot. So I just wanted to give you the chance to welcome him.
Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Really excited about the work ahead of us, and we've been hitting the ground running the last few weeks. So, and then I also wanted to just let the board know that there was a letter that went out to all of our elementary school families last week, giving them information about some new registration procedures. We're going to try to do elementary registration online this year instead of all the paper packets. And then we also gave them information about the August 9th resource fair, and then introducing school supply lists for the first time in a long time for elementary schools. And I'll make sure in the board update tomorrow, they'll get all of you a link to that if you didn't get one already. That's all.
Okay, well, thank you. And next is information from student representatives. So I'll start with you, Gabby.
Oh, hi, it's good to be back. Missing this place. I don't have anything yet.
I've got nothing.
We've been chilling in summer.
Not many students email us during
Nope.
the summer.
Working in school. Hey, listen, there was one. Well, we know him.
You have to pester them.
They don't even email us during the school year. I highly doubt they're gonna email us during the summer.
We're doing our best here, okay? But we're there.
In case they have to use us.
Yep.
And I should note that Cole is absent and excused.
Yes, he's out of town.
Anything else?
Nope.
Yeah, thank you. Information from board members. Ed?
Much. Went to the Acme Parade again this year for 4th of July, which is a delight. And we had a girls basketball team had a float. They participate in yeah, the schools, it's actually, I mean, it's summertime, but there are a lot of kids showing up for sports activities. I don't know if FFA has other events going on, but I know that they're doing weightlifting and basketball and volleyball and football all through June now. So a lot of kids working hard for next school year. That's it.
I got summer, I don't really have much, just working a little bit FFA. Some of the kids are getting ready for Linden Fair. So there's that coming up for them, and a small group of kids going this year, but still there's a few going, so that's good. And they're kind of a revamp at the barn that's taking shape. So they had a work party last week, and they're planning on having another one here the next week or two. So that's about it.
Was this all week racing for you?
Last week.
Last week,
Yep.
okay, because
Yep.
I was thinking, I'm
Yep.
glad to see you here.
Yeah, last week.
Okay. Danielle?
No news yet, but I do plan next week to attend a conference at the University of Washington Bothell. They're putting on a thing for K through 12 educators and policymakers, and there are going to be some breakout sessions on AI.
Uh-huh.
So I'm going.
Who's
I'll let-
putting that on?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but I'll give you an update next time with some info on what I get from it.
Great. So we've had, I think since our last report, two binding condition meetings with OSPI. And are you going to address those later?
Not in detail. I think that would be a better
All right,
time.
I don't need to go into detail, but I think they were pleased with our progress. TJ Kelly always seems to be thinking off the top of his head, so you get a little bit of insight to what he's thinking, but not necessarily, as you would say, a clear answer of which way we're going to go forward. And so that remains to be seen, although I think he said he will clarify our next steps, I think, with a letter in September, if I remember right. So and also we had just kind of a check-in with ESD on our budget. So I think from that level, I think we're on. I think the word was they feel like we're on track in terms of developing this year's budget. Those were the main things I had. Next up is the consent agenda. Entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
So who got the second in? Did you do, Jason? You
You
gotta have that split second timer there. So we'll get that in the record. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Superintendent informational items.
I put together a slide just to keep myself a little organized here.
Pretty trees.
Yes, I like that background a lot. Okay, so first I wanted to call the board's attention to our facility use application. This is, it is linked in the superintendent informational items on board docs, if anybody's listening and wanting to see this. This was an updated application that the board first passed back in January. And then, but we weren't going to make any changes mid-year to how we were charging people. And then we sent out a letter to a lot of our community partners that use our facilities in June. And these changes are set to take effect, I believe, we set up for August 1st. And we did get some feedback initially. And I'm glad that the feedback, there was confusion, but it was just a matter of making sure that we were presenting this information in a clear way. So we had some back and forth conversations with MBSD-AA and some concerns they had about how much it would cost for custodial services plus rental fees. And we cleared up that there is no, it's just custodial fees if we as a district are having to pay a custodian to stay extra. So if they're using our facilities and there's already a custodian on site, there's no extra charge. And I know that Shannon Richardson, our operations director, met with MBYAA last week and had a good conversation. And I think they've got a good understanding of where we're going forward with that. The goal with this update, as we stated back in January, was to ensure that the district is recovering any actual costs that facility use is taking, and then that we're also applying our policy in a fair way to all groups.
Are we able to give the facility users a schedule for our normal custodial hours? So they know if they're choosing what time to have an
Yeah,
activity?
when they fill out their forms, and I know that Angie Bass here at the district office, she has really good conversations with them, and she goes over a lot of those details about what is it that they're requesting, and then what our hours and things like that might be.
There's a night custodian, they're here pretty late.
Yeah, depending, I mean, on the Deming campus, more so than the elementary schools,
Right,
and so
yeah.
it's a little bit different, but yeah, they're here fairly late. Okay, I have a short facilities update as well. One of the things in the consent agenda had to do with some soccer field improvements. Now, this is not a soccer field fix. That's still going to be happening much later in the future. But the work that we're hoping to start as soon as next week, what we're going to be doing is improving the goalie box areas and excavating the ground down, putting in some new dirt, putting in new sod. And then there's also some work on the field itself. We've been told that if we aerate the field a little bit differently, that should get us some improvements as well. So that's,
Is that like a deep thatching or?
I believe so. It's not my area of
See,
expertise.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, seeing what kind of soil it gets down to, but we'll find, it'd be a useful experiment.
Yes. But I know that the goalie boxes in particular were of concern of a lot of players and parents, and so
Okay.
this will be a good improvement. And be ready to go before school starts.
Is that how it got brought up, parent, player, maybe coaches? Because there's other stuff they could work on there too, but I guess that was private.
Yes, this was specifically from parents.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
The other quote that you approved was from Northwest Surveying and GPS. This is for our one of the first steps of many. We're working on our football field and track. So this is a survey, mapping, and related services, and they'll be looking at all of our water, sewage, and drainage. We know we've got some concerns about what's happening with that salmon stream. This will give us some updated information about that. And so this probably isn't going to happen for another, at least the quote here says 4 to 5 weeks after getting approval. So this is a slow process, and we'll make sure to communicate with ASB and other interested parties that we're charting the course, but we're not going to have a football field by this time next year, or a new one.
Is that part of the 35,000 I saw in the budget for?
For capital projects?
Yeah, under capital projects for turf field investigation,
Yes.
that's part of it. Okay. Do you have a feeling for, so we're gonna do this, and I know there's so many steps of studies and things that need to get done. How is that process managed overall? Is that something that Tex helps with, or?
Yep, so Tex and Laddish working with Shannon Richardson and now working with Service. So they, and when we do our updated capital projects presentation to the board, I'm hoping by the end of September, we can give you a little bit more detail and information about how they're putting that together.
The process and timeline for
Yeah.
that, yeah. Because I'm guessing that budget probably already had an idea of how many things we could pay for this year. There must be, and this is one of that, this is.
Yeah, I mean, these are some of the initial steps into that, and I'll talk about it more during the budget presentation for capital projects.
Okay.
But that is an estimated number,
Right.
because we just weren't ready to give, I appreciated how Shannon and Tex and Jay are working, they're not wanting to give false information to the board that we're gonna have to change. Later,
Right.
so.
Okay.
And then one other item for Acme Elementary is there is the ramp replacement quote. We're gonna get those, the ramps and railings around the annex and the portables replaced, and we believe this also can be done before school starts. So we'll be able to get going with that after tonight. And then another thing that Shannon will have, hopefully by the next board meeting, some information. As we know, the bricks on Acme, the exterior walls are not in great shape. And there's a particular area of high concern in terms of bricks potentially falling on students. And so one option would be to cordon that area off and not allow anybody near it. But that's close to where a lot of kids come by when we do the bus drop off at Acme. So she's going to get a quote for what it would cost or what some options would be to put some kind of barrier on the exterior of the wall there, whether it's permanent or temporary. We'll have more information on that soon. Any questions on facilities? I've been working with our Nooksack tribal representatives quite extensively over the last couple of months. As I've mentioned in previous meetings, with our Title VI federal money, we're now over the dollar amount that triggers tribal consultation. And so just today I was meeting and we were talking about an MOU that is going to be an agreement about data sharing, consultation work, curriculum, and the new liaison position that's we're hoping to fill before school starts. My goal is that we'll be able to review that MOU at the August 13th board meeting. And the nice part about that is that's the day after we'll have finished the strengthening tribal consultation training that we get to host here in Mount Baker. So I think that's going to give the board a really good foundation for the purpose and meaning of that MOU. So we'll talk about that at the 13th. And then we're potentially going to bring the final MOU to the board at August 27th, and the Nooksack Tribal Council has also been invited to attend, and that's something that we would do at the very start of the meeting to commemorate that MOU. So more to come on that, but I just wanted to give you a heads up. It's been a lot of work, but it's been good work, and I've appreciated the partnership. It's been good so far. And then lastly, we do have our August 5th board retreat. Brenna and I met earlier this week and we kind of outlined the agenda for that. I will share that with the board in board updates tomorrow. And if there's anything in that that you'd like to change or adjust, just let me know. There's lots of time to do that. I think it'll be a good day. We'll get a lot of good work done. And our student reps, are you were, okay, so you'll be there the whole time? Okay.
I'll be able to make it in the afternoon.
Okay. Cool. Sounds good. And that's all I have.
Okay, well, thank you. The next up is the budget presentation.
Okay. So this budget presentation was shared with the board and what?
Sidewalk, sorry.
Sorry.
With the board and was also posted online for the community a little over a week ago. And so we're going to just go through this and we've got a few talking points, but if at any point you've got any questions, please let us know. Right after this, are you planning to just roll into the monthly presentation too? So this is the last board meeting of the month where we would normally do our monthly budget information. And so we'll do that at the same time right after this presentation. Okay, so this presentation is built like a booklet, so that it gives information that not only conveys the information about the upcoming budget plan for the 26-27 school year, but also gives a lot of just background information to help the board and the community understand how school districts are funded and how we look at our budgets. We did request comments, and we got some questions from the board that we'll talk about a little bit today. But the development process, as the board knows, starts much earlier in the school year. We've done a lot of work around enrollment and talking about expenditures and priorities and staffing. And so really happy that we're finally at the accumulation of all of that work. Okay, so enrollment, and this, I would say that this is, I think, probably been the biggest thing that we've been focusing on as a board over the last few months. And this budget is, I think, built on a conservative number, and I'll talk about that more in just a little bit, but it's important to note that for the previous year's budget, the 25-26 budget, that had a projected enrollment of 1,520 full-time equivalent students. And that ended up being too high of an estimate. And what saved us budget-wise was that we had some timber revenue from last school year, and our fund balance was also healthy enough that we were able to take funds from that in order to offset. It was about a $300,000 drop in apportionment that happened in January. And I think that highlights the importance of why we need the fund balance where it's at. It's not only about being able to pay bills, but it's also being able to respond to unanticipated events like that. So the budget that we're presenting to you tonight is built off of one of our more conservative enrollment projections, which was just over 1,400 students. And you can see that our kindergarten budgeted amount is at 72. And at last count, I think we're about at 64 or 65 kinders that have registered. So we're almost there, and we'll see where what numbers are like once all the schools open again and secretaries are putting hopefully more kinder bodies into our schools. And so we'll be monitoring that very closely over the next month. One of the things that we talked about with the ESD, and I had another conversation with Lisa Matthews just today, is that if we do not hit that 14-18 number, if that proves not to be low enough, they're committed to continuing to work with us really closely, because that's going to require us to do some additional changes in our budget. And so hopefully that's not the case, but we're making some plans just in case. Any questions or thoughts on enrollment before I go on? Enrollment was one of the questions that I think we were talking, and that was one of your questions, like what are we doing proactively about enrollment? And
Right.
Really, one of the main things we're doing is making sure that we're building strong programs, because in order to attract families that haven't chosen Mount Baker, in order to retain the families that are choosing Mount Baker, we need to make sure that they're seeing that this district is worth staying in. And that's going to take a little bit of time for some folks, but
Yeah.
with our strategic plan and other things we have in place, that's the work ahead of us.
I think that was my favorite answer of the questions that I asked. Because we're talking about positive things we're doing, like the criminal justice
Yes.
class and retaining families. This is all positive stuff. So
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
We'll talk more about it later with staffing, but that was one of the filters as we were making staffing decisions, was not reducing the elementary classroom teacher numbers, because we knew that was something that our community and our families were watching really closely in terms of making decisions about staying in our district or not.
Yeah.
Now, if enrollment continues to go down, we may not be able to keep that for next year, but that was an intentional decision this year.
You've also talked about expanding online academy and homeschool. Can you talk a little bit about?
Yeah, there's no plans in place yet, but it was something that struck me this last spring when we did an analysis of the number of students that are choicing out of our district. And so they live in our district, but they're choosing whether it's Meridian or Linden or Nooksack or Bellingham. They're not physically going to those districts, but they're going to their online programs or their homeschool parent partnership programs. And so that's something that we need to start looking at. Well, what are those parents wanting and needing? And could we convince them to get those services with us?
Yeah, I think there's probably a good number of families that live in the area because they like the rural setting and they want to homeschool. So there may be some opportunities there.
Yeah.
I see them on our sports teams because they still come for that part of it, even if
Yes.
they're not in the class.
And I think in our conversation with TJ Kelly, OSBI, he recognized the needle that we're trying to thread in this and articulated kind of what he sees of our need to balance our revenues, expenditures, fund balance, and still maintain the kind of program that retains students and attracts students. And so that was, I think, a valuable part of our conversation.
This is a really important year ahead of us in terms of what we can accomplish with showing what we're doing with our programs. And if we can maintain enrollment, I think that that'll be an indicator that we're doing well with that. If enrollment continues to decline, we have hard conversations ahead.
I'm gonna bang the gong that I always bang, which is the birth rate is down. And so there's a certain amount of this that's outside of our control. Yes. Right, so while I just want to say that and be on the record of reminding us that we're doing all that we can do, and at the same time, kids that aren't born don't enroll in kindergarten. Right, so there's a certain degree of this that we have to anticipate. Yes.
Okay, so I will talk a little bit about where the money comes from, so our revenue. We have 4 main sources of revenue. Our local resources, which are generated through our voter-approved educational programs and operations levies. For the current budget year, the district anticipates approximately $5.3 million in local revenue that will support and help support services that are not fully funded by the state. And as we all know, we are not fully funded by the state, so those local resources are extremely important to our district. State resources, the district is projecting approximately $24.5 million in state funding to support our basic education operations. These funds are distributed throughout our state apportionment and targeted programs. Because the state funding is largely driven by student enrollment, declining enrollment continues to present a financial challenge for the district. We've got federal resources, and we are budgeting approximately $2.8 million in federal funding. And these funds are designated for targeted student support, such as the title program, special education, child nutrition, professional development, and strengthening instructional practices. Federal funding supplements, but does not replace or supplant, as they like to say, the funding, and it's restricted to specific programs. And then we also have capacity, and I just want to make sure we all understand what capacity is. We have built in $500,000 in both revenues and expenditures for capacity. And this isn't extra money by any means. It's not a pot of money. It simply allows flexibility to accommodate unanticipated revenue. So in order to spend that capacity on the expenditure side, we would need to have it come in as revenue. So it's essentially just a placeholder. And as I mentioned, we've got our property taxes and local levy. The school district works on a fiscal year opposed to a calendar year, which operates September through August. Property taxes are levied and collected on a calendar year, January through December. And as I mentioned, we're looking at $5.3 million in levy funds, which is about 18% of the total revenue available to the district for the 26-27 school year. Because the district's fiscal year and the tax cycle do not align, levy revenue is received through the calendar year while expenditures occur across September through August. So the timing differences contributes to the seasonal fluctuations in cash flow, which we do throughout the year. And then this is just a graph that identifies our revenues, our historical revenues, and there's not a ton of fluctuation here. 24-25 was a reasonable enrollment year, and that's why it was up to 34.7 million that year. It is declining, obviously, due to enrollment. And I'll touch on how general fund money is spent. General fund expenditures are categorized in several ways. For budget development and finance reporting, we have organized expenditures by programs and activities, allowing for a clear understanding how our resources support student learning and district operation. Program budgeting provides a detailed view of costs associated with instructional programs and the activities required to deliver education services. In addition to classroom instruction, it includes general fund support of food services, transportation, motor pool, grounds and maintenance. District administration expenditures include the school board, superintendent, business office, and administrators other than the building principals. These functions provide the leadership, fiscal oversight, and operational support that is necessary for effective management. Personnel costs remain to be the district's largest investment. I believe that really reflects our commitment to classroom instruction and student services, trying to retain our staff so that we can provide the programs, which will help retain our students. Salaries and employee benefits account for approximately 83% of the general fund budget, which is quite typical for schools in Washington state. The remaining 17% supports the day-to-day operation of the district. This distribution again demonstrates the majority of the district resources are invested directly in people who serve our students. And this is a look at those expenditures in graph form. So certificated salaries, classified salaries, and employee benefits make up that 83% that I just mentioned. 4% is MSOCs, materials, supplies, and operating costs. 11% is purchase services. 1% is travel, and another 1% is capital outlay.
So this capital outlay is outside the capital outlay that we identify and reimburse from the capital fund?
Yeah, capital outlay is equipment and materials that are over our threshold, which is $10,000. So that's considered capital outlay as opposed to capital projects. So two different things. I won't go through this in detail. I believe you have it in front of you. It's very, very small up there, but so these are general fund expenditures compared by activity. So without going into too much accounting lingo, we have account codes for everything that we spend and all the revenues that we receive, and they're built using an activity code. So the codes on the very left are part of a very long account code, and that's the activity code. So any expenditures or revenues that pertain to the board of directors would have an activity code of 11 and so on. So this just gives you a breakdown of where specifically we've budgeted our revenues and expenditures.
Are there rules of thumb for ratios of, say, teaching support to teaching activity or admin?
I don't know that there's, you mean, is there a guideline?
Yeah, just based on experience, we have 3 million of teaching support and 21 million of teaching activity. And so obviously we've got admin 2 million And so I'm just curious if there's any kind of rules of thumb that you would look at this and say, oh, this number's too high or this number's too low.
Well, we built this data looking at historical numbers.
Okay.
So, actual versus budgeted versus actually what was spent.
Right.
And so we went through each activity and analyzed, well, the budget was 3 million. Expenditures were 2 million. So I'm not going to budget $3 million.
Right.
So we went through every single activity and just looked at what was spent, what was budgeted, what are we anticipating?
Right.
If we know that it's going to be higher for some reason, or if it was high, because of a one-off, we had an expenditure come through that we weren't anticipating, so it wasn't budgeted. All of that was analyzed, but I wouldn't say there's necessarily a guideline.
I would jump in and say, like that 83% that we're spending on people,
Mhm.
that's a pretty common
Mhm.
range in education. You know, that's one of your biggest costs is people. And so anywhere from 80 to 88,
85,
85, that range, that's pretty.
Yeah, I've
pretty
heard that one. I
standard.
know
Yeah.
as a big number it is. I was curious about some of these smaller numbers and how that.
I bet if you talk to people who had worked at lots of different institutions and had seen many budgets, you might be able to get somebody to give you kind of sense of that. But it sounds like building from our historical practices is a good way to look and think about it too.
Yeah, I think some of it is what are your priorities? What are we trying to spend our money on? Where do we see the value in our expenditures? That's what we're trying to build this on.
Yeah, and local needs can vary.
Right.
So this next slide gives an overview of the staffing changes that were made at the end of this school year in anticipation of the new school year. And I should note that this does not mean that 22 people lost their jobs with the district. We looked at 22 positions that we either changed or moved around. So in all, there were about, and there was, again, some moving around, but about 12 employees who we had to give separation notices to. But this shows kind of some of the work that we were doing in terms of, like, for example, the secondary teachers, the 2 FTE, those were 2 retirees that we didn't fill. The mental health specialist positions, those were because of grant funding that has changed, and a lot of that's still up in the air. We're still trying to figure out how we support that mental health need. So that's a decision that's yet to come. The certificated administrator is also a retirement, and that gave us the opportunity to do some creative staffing where that's now where that hybrid position of the Acme principal and teaching director is coming together. So it's no FTE increase there, and it is some cost savings for the district. We did commit to ensuring that Harmony Elementary School has a full-time counselor. So this last year they had a 0.5 counselor. They'll now have a 1.0 counselor. And then we also are using grant funding differently to create some student support specialist positions that will support the principals in a quasi-administrative role that, again, is at less cost than a regular full-time principal or assistant principal. We'll see if that works, or if it doesn't, we're ready to pivot. But the other thing that I think is important to note is we do have a salary freeze for all administrators and non-represented staff. We're still working with our bargaining groups on negotiations for our represented groups, and well, that's still in progress.
Will the student support specialist, does that help address the concern that we've heard so many times about the assistant principal position?
Yes, these people will be focusing primarily on attendance and behavior
Mhm.
with students. And so that's a lot of work that, like, if a principal's in an office dealing with behavioral referrals or tracking down student attendance, they have a harder time being an instructional leader in the classrooms and doing other things. And so that's the main role that these positions will fill.
Great. It's nice that there's a grant funding
Mhm.
to help with that. And then, I mean, this is one of the questions I had, but just kind of the guiding principles around, you know, the folks that did get a notice versus other people that we have. What were some of your, you know, goals and
Mhm.
people that you did have to?
Well, one of the things we wanted to avoid was a full-on RIP, because that is very destructive across the system. And so the majority of certificated staff who were not renewed, they were provisional teachers. And by state law, within your first 3 years of teaching, a district can, it's not a reflection on their performance. It's not a reflection on, it's just, we can say, we don't have a job for you next year. And so there were 7 of those employees who were in that situation. And then we worked with PSC to identify how we were going to do the same kind of idea with classified staff. And that was more of a seniority issue where it was just some of the lowest senior people were the ones that were let go. There is in both contracts callback language so that if positions become available within the next year or two, those people would have first option of getting them back.
I do appreciate that you're able to retain our elementary school teachers. So you mentioned it, I think that's super important for the reasons you said.
So all of that hard work was in effort of, one, making sure that we were able to present a balanced budget to the board tonight, but also really keeping in mind what's happening with our projected fund balance. As we know, for our binding conditions, we need to pass a budget that, and actually have an actual ending fund balance, right, of at least 4%. And so that'll be a conversation that we have with OSPI for the end of October. And it's important to note, though, that our board policy is still 5%, and that's something that we'll talk a lot more about. We've had some initial conversations about when and if more timber money does come in. Instead of pushing that toward programs, do we say, nope, we're going to dedicate that to our fund balance until we get it to a place that we feel more meets board policy and we feel meets our needs. But you can see that, you know, just since 2020, you know, the district was in a really good place with fund balance, and there's this slide really shows the tough journey the district's been on, and hopefully we can maintain and climb out just a little bit there.
Yeah.
And speaking of the future,
Look at my crystal ball, and this is what I deduced. We are actually required by law to create a 4-year budget plan for OSPI. We're required to forecast revenues and expenditures over a 4-year period. So our assumptions over 4 years, revenues are projected to decline by an average of 0.6% annually, while expenditures are declining by 0.9%. Because expenditures are projected to decrease a little faster than revenue, the district's ending fund balance actually improves over time. Again, the projected fund balance achieves the lower end of the 4%. However, I think that, and I mean, we are guessing here, so, but I feel strongly that we are working towards, it's not just a projection with numbers. I really feel like we are working towards that 5% fund balance. and we're doing everything in our power to get there. Some things are definitely out of our control, such as enrollment, but we are doing what we can to retain those folks and just gradually, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, and it's going to take a little bit of time, but I think every year, if we can just increase by even a little, we're going in the right direction.
I've been really encouraged by the work the last few months of the work as we're examining our expenditures and really evaluating what's needed and what changes that we can make. An example of that is, so Kim Elms, who is Acme principal and teaching and learning director, and another hat that's kind of thrown into that for her is technology. And she has an extensive background in technology, which I didn't know about. I'm glad we do now. And she's been doing a fantastic job of combing through a lot of our technology contracts and different things that we had just traditionally spent money on, thinking that was just what the cost was. And she's been able to either find alternative vendors or talk current vendors into lowering prices. And, you know, it's a little bit, you know, it's 5,000 here, 10,000 here, but it's that kind of aggressive look at our numbers that's needed. And so we're in a good place, and we're going to keep doing that.
Yeah, well, 1% is $135,000, right? So. Yeah,
it adds up.
You could get there, yeah.
Yeah, and on top of that, I'd just like to give a shout out to our whole team, because I really feel like everyone has a piece in this, whether Kim has the ideas, our fiscal specialist is pulling reports and also combing through the data to find that information. And they're all very aware of the situation we're in, I think more so than ever. And all of them are they're doing a great job of participating and really trying to find cost savings where we can. And they're very aware. So I'm really proud of them. Proud to be a part of the team.
I agree.
So this document is also required by law, by Senate Bill 5187. We are, as a Washington State school, we're required to disclose the amount of MSOCs, which again is material, supplies, and operating costs that are allocated by the state through apportionment, as well as our corresponding expenditures. The purpose of this is essentially to show that our expenditures for these programs exceed the state allocations. And that's what this does. So again, this is by program. So program 1 is basic education, 2 is alternative learning, 3 dropout reengage, 31 and 34 are vocational, and 97 is overall district support. And then again, these are part of our account code breakdown. So the object code is 5 for supplies and materials, 7 is purchase services, 8 being travel, and 9 capital outlay. So on the bottom, the total expenditure is 2.7 million. And then according to our 1191 F203, which tells us what we are getting for revenue, our total allocation is 2.1 million. So it does just that. It shows that our expenditures exceed our allocation.
Okay, so that was the overview of our general fund. We're going to start talking about some of the other funds, starting with capital projects. Our beginning fund balance for capital projects this year will be at 3.2 million, and we'll be bringing in an additional 2 million in tax revenue for that. The expenditures is where we're going to have a lot more information for you in the coming months. And so we know that part of that capital levy covers technology, and so we do have a dedicated amount for technology there. We're ballparking, if we do decide to do the Acme siding project, and that'll be something that the board decides if that's something we hit yes on, but that would be about 1.1 million is what Shannon and Tex are thinking that it might be right now, but again, more to come. That capital needs assessment, that's with Service Architects to continue to look at getting a really clear picture of not only what are the overall kind of depreciation conditions of our buildings, but what getting into a lot more detail to help us understand what the needs are so that we can make a more intentional plan about what we focus on and how much we spend on. The turf field investigation, the 35,000 there, so that the assessment that we're going to get started with, that'll come out of that. We know we want to set aside funds for that. And then the very general allocated funds for priority projects. That again, we're at about 2.9 million. And that is, we're going to define what that means after we get more information from the capital needs assessment. But we're identifying that we do have money and we know we're going to use it responsibly and intentionally when we've got the correct information. Any questions on capital projects?
Is the technology equipment, is that a fairly well-known number, or is that also more of a?
That's the number that we transfer from capital to the general fund, and we transferred for the last 3 years of that.
So.
So the next three funds are our Transportation Vehicle Fund, ASB Fund, and Debt Service Fund. We do not anticipate purchasing any buses next year. For the 25-26 school year, the district is expected to receive $237,000 in depreciation. There's been some changes with how they fund depreciation or calculate the depreciation costs. I'd love for Suzanne to touch on that. That's not my forte, but I know it does have an impact on all districts, but larger districts much more so.
Are you just putting on expenditures in the 930,000 as a placeholder if we're not intending to purchase any buses?
You know, Russ, that's a good question.
I kind of, I didn't have a question before, because in reading this, I just presumed that was the amount that we intended to spend on buses.
Right, and I just spoke with her recently. I feel like I have to go through my emails now. Because I'm not recalling what that 930 is.
Well, from a budget standpoint, we're still have a positive ending fund balance, and that gives us capacity.
It does. I'm just not recalling what exactly that was. But I am recalling the conversation with her that she wasn't planning on purchasing any buses.
Because it seems like it's more than I would expect for, like, larger engine replacements and stuff like that, ongoing expenditures.
If you add revenue and the beginning fund balance, it's about 130. Maybe that's just a misplaced.
That's a good, thank you. Before this night is over, I can look at my F203 and my F195, and that will tell me exactly.
Yeah, that might be
yes.
It might not be an expenditure.
Yeah,
it might be the ending fund balance.
On to something there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if we didn't buy buses, then likely the actual ending fund balance would be higher than the 3,000.
Yeah, I think those are just a no, but I will confirm that. So ASB fund, they have presented their budget as well, and just to touch on what the ASB fund is, it's a financial transaction that funds are limited to the general student body activities, athletics, classes, clubs, and private monies. The ASB budget gives the students the necessary budget capacity to carry out their normal operations throughout the school year. And they are looking at expenditures of $307,000 and revenues of $226,000 with an ending fund balance of $244,698. And then our debt service fund is used to make payments on the district's long-term debt, which we currently have no outstanding bonds for debt. So the ending fund balance remains the same as it was this year with just over $1,000 in it.
Any questions on ASB?
Looking at this as transportation. So summary of all budgets, or summary budget of all funds, projecting ending fund balance for the general fund is $1.354 million. Capital projects is $737,000. ASB $244,000. Transportation, we're going to double check, and then debt service is $1338,000. And then this is a look at our financial future as the business office sees it. Hopefully we all see this in some fashion. 2026, 27, we are looking at controlling expenditures and staffing, creating more of an alignment that we've seen in the past between enrollment and staffing and expenditures. We're focusing on purpose-driven spending. 27, 28, we're looking at rebuilding our fund balance and evaluating programs. Again, trying to retain those students. 28, 29, strengthening and growing our student programs and improving our financial stability. 29, 30, hopefully by 2030, we've reached a sustainable financial situation.
So to wrap this up, that last page is just, I won't read any of this, but that gives just a little bit more background and explanation about the different categories of expenditures. Our binding conditions letter from October of last year, no major changes, but we want to make sure we're including that because that is a major kind of shadow over our entire budgeting process. And so we can stop and ask questions now about this, or we can also roll into our monthly budget information too and take questions.
Why don't we ask questions about this before we,
Okay.
because it's kind of a shift in gears. And I'd like to ask Gabby and Lena first if you have any questions or comments or.
Nothing over here.
How closely do you follow the ASB budget?
So, not extremely closely because a lot of the ASB has kind of some budgeting things that they kind of deal with. So there's not a lot that we can kind of look at and watch. They kind of manage it all on their own.
Yeah, they kind of take the wheel on how they manage their money and all that, just because, you know, sometimes they hold money for different clubs and activities and stuff like that. So sometimes like the whole number that we see isn't really perhaps what ASB in and of itself has.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously, you know, we have some questions from time to time. We ask them, they get answered pretty easily.
Mhm.
So
So you don't have a lot of back and forth, like, why should we do, can't we do this instead?
And maybe that's something we improve over the student rep jobs as kind of our communication with their ASB budget, but other than that, they've been doing it.
What is your sense of feeling of students on the ASB fee for students. So there's get your ASB card, what do we put it at, $50 now? I think?
So, yeah, I think that's what it is, like, it's literally just like a sticker too that they kind of place on your student ID. To make it an ASB card.
And students feel like that's a fair price.
I
haven't heard anything.
Yeah, I haven't heard really anybody complain about it. Those that usually buy the ASB card, they're usually people that really do go to like every single game, whether it be a home or away
Yeah.
game. So for them, it really does, it's worth, the cost is worth it. For people that go for time to time, or maybe just for like football season, but maybe not for like track meets, then it's like, obviously it isn't as worth it.
And I believe they're received throughout the year, so I know from just being in the office that some students will, when their sports come up, that's when they'll pay it, so that gives them time, so it's not always paid right at the beginning of the year, like rush to get it basically. Pay it whenever it comes.
Oh, thank you. So Ed, thank you for submitting very good questions in advance.
Yeah.
And did you feel like you got those answered?
Yeah, well, the only question that might be worth, Jessica, was the question on how the budget does or does not align with our strategic plan.
So my answer to that partly was the timing of this budget development and the finalization of that strategic plan. I don't feel like really gave us a chance to be intentional about it this time around. That said, though, we had started having, as I've said, more intentional discussions about staffing and planning for costs related to professional development and curriculum. One of the things we knew that we needed, regardless of what happened in the strategic plan, was that we needed a better system for collecting data and being able to measure our progress. And so that was why we purchased the Panorama program that the board approved a couple months ago. We were able to get we used grant money that needed to be spent. If we didn't spend it, we would have lost it. And we were able to negotiate a 3-year contract with them. So it won't be a recurring cost, and that gives us the tool we need in order to be able to do the work of some of the strategic plan. A lot of the things in our plan, I don't think are going to cost an immense amount of money. They are strategies. They're not programs. The things that will cost money is making sure that we are able to pay for the time for the people to do the work. And so that's a challenge ahead of us, because it's, as we know, when staffing costs are 83% of the budget, it costs a lot. But so another thing that we're working on with Stephen just the last few weeks is looking at ways to use federal and state grant money that are allocated for special education, and then also supporting district programs to make sure that we're supporting students before they get to having special education needs. And so one of our hopes, if we are able to secure that grant funding, is that we would be able to pay for substitutes so that teachers could have professional development learning during the school day. So we're not having to pay extra for that. And we'd be able to design the experiences that we need teachers to have in order to be able for them to design the experiences we need students to have. And so that's another thing.
Great.
A lot of that, though, when you think about the checks that we're going to have on the strategic plan throughout the year, that's going to be some of that two-way communication and feedback between the board, myself, district staff, and the community around what's working, what's not, and what do we need to do to ensure our resources meet the strategic plan needs.
Cool. I like the panorama and the fact that it's paid for by grant. That's awesome.
Yes.
I was kind of looking at our strategic plan. So in terms of collecting data, I'm guessing that kind of shows up under the safety and belonging aspect. I wasn't sure if it showed up under early learning or mastery of standards or.
The collection of data, you mean?
Yes, from that.
It will, because what Panorama is going to allow us to do, because we have so much data available to us, it's going to put it all in one place. So that we'll be able to run reports not only about attendance and behavior, the student perception survey. So students are going to get a survey in the fall just around about a number of issues around, so we can gauge how students are feeling about school and the work that we're doing. Parents are going to get that same survey. Staff took that survey this last spring. So we'll have that Panorama houses that, but then it's also going to pull everything from Skyward in terms of grades. It'll pull things from the the state testing system. So we'll have that, so I can run a report on a particular grade and be able to see all of those metrics. And it'll be really helpful.
Great.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Can I back,
Susan?
oh, sorry,
Go ahead.
I was just.
Oh, go ahead.
Yours more important than mine, probably.
No, I just pulled our F-195 data and also went through my email, so I do apologize. So it is actually an expenditure, and that is correct. And according to Suzanne, we will be purchasing 2 buses. So
Oh, okay.
I misspoke. I think I was trying to clarify our current year. We had an encumbrance, and I was clarifying whether or not we were going to use that encumbrance. So I'm recalling
Yeah,
now.
okay, that
So,
makes more
yeah,
sense.
sorry about that. I
Okay.
apologize.
No, that's fine. Yeah, Jason.
Not really much, just more comments. For me, thank you guys and your team for bringing us the information. There was nothing surprised us before a meeting. We heard some, whether it was insurance costs going up, state money being less than we were originally planning. I felt this year was very good information for all of us on the board, and that's very greatly appreciated on our end, I feel. So that was really nice. And to hear that you felt it was good with everybody going around, it's like a great morale thing. And going into a school year, I think that's a very good thing. With a strategic plan done, a budget done, that looks pretty good. I think I feel pretty confident in the whole situation.
And you?
Okay, so I have a few comments. I'm trying to decide where to start. First, I guess, things that I really appreciated. I noticed a lot of good explanation and transparency in this budget. And I just want to point out one of my favorite moments of that, under the staffing changes section, when you were noting the additions column, and you had put that it was grant funded student support specialist and grant funded native student success coordinator. I felt like that was really important to clarify to folks that while we're having to make reductions over here, the places where we're making additions aren't coming directly out of our pocket, right? I thought that that was really important clarity, and that came through really, really well. I was thinking about your question about alignment to the strategic plan, and I had noticed on this one page, under pupil safety, under teaching support, that our proposed budget is up about 152% from what we budgeted last year. And I think when you think about that category of pupil safety, that's very much in alignment with our new strategic plan, right? It's like that's been top of mind, I think. And it's showing up in where we're making something a bigger priority. And so I really appreciated seeing that in the budget. I wondered if not everybody is as number-minded as I am, and going to sit and crunch, ooh, that's 152% increase from last year, right? And so they might not notice that those numbers do reflect priorities that are in alignment with our strategic plan and our values and what we've been hearing from parents in the community. And I wonder if in the future there's a way for us to better highlight that for folks. I don't know if it's like having a column showing like percentage up or down from one budget to the next, just so people can see at a glance where we're placing priority and where we're maybe lowering something in priority. That might help tell that story. I don't know, maybe there's another way to do that, but that was something that stood out to me as I was drilling in and looking and asking questions that I thought was worth highlighting. I think a lot of folks in the community would appreciate seeing that while we might not have a lot of extra money to work with, we did show our values there. And so I wanted to highlight that. So that kind of gets to an aspect of what you were asking, Ed. Yeah.
Sure.
And so, thank you. for that, and on behalf, I think, of a lot of parents. I think parents would appreciate seeing that nudge toward student safety reflected in our budget. I also did have a question about, you know, I love to talk about enrollment. The kinder enrollment. So we're about, what, 7 students shy of what we projected,
About 10.
about 10. Do we have a sense of historically, how many late enrollments we get in the summer? Is that typical to get 2 or 3 per school right before school starts, or is that not? You know, I'm just trying to get a sense of how realistic that is.
Yeah, I haven't looked at the historical data, which is something I can do, but I know that last year we had about another 10 to 15.
Yeah, I don't have numbers, but I would say just in conversation, it's definitely, it happens. And part of that too is that secretaries are gone all summer. So some of that isn't processing until they come back in August.
Okay.
So, and then even later from that, I imagine just movement, families moving around. I mean, it could go both ways, but I think it's pretty common. So, I spoke with Sherry Reynolds, who does our enrollment every month, and we were looking at about current enrollment for next year as of Tuesday was about 1402. So that's K-12 and ALE. But there's just a lot of movement. People made
Making some last minute
Yeah.
decisions. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm just like, ooh, how much can we drill in and predict based on past trends? You know, how close are we to hitting that target? How realistic is that? Dr. Crystal Ball.
Yeah.
Okay.
in my back pocket.
Okay, good. So that's just sort of something that I was wondering about. And then I think the rest of it, I can let Les ask his questions, but if I have more, I can talk to you about later.
Thank you. I think getting to a 4% fund balance is taking an enormous amount of work. You know, both in reducing in hard decisions, reducing staff, and as you were saying, combing through expenditures, 5,000 here, 10,000 there, and continuing it to control expenditures all the way along. So I really recognize all the efforts, and I'm sure I'm only aware of a small portion of the efforts that you put in on a daily basis to get to that number. And that's a significant advance for us over the past few years to be able to have the things that hit us this year, that you know, the increase in insurance costs, increase in energy costs, that coming into the year were unanticipated really to that degree. And energy, you know, insurance, we've got that fixed for the year. That should be a bill, basically. Energy is still a wild card. I was a little bit comforted by the future market for December for oil is close to back to normal. I think they may be dreaming, but you know, stock prices for energy companies are still way up, but futures market actually reflects real money, real oil moving in that, and so that, but you know, I think it's anybody's guess. But you have to build a budget, and you have to use the information we have today and the reasonable projections and go from there. And I think that's what we do. But it still does make me nervous looking ahead to this next year, particularly energy. Because that's, you've got your employment contracts, so you've got your enrollment and your costs that can fluctuate, and those are the.
I thought we signed a contract for fuel at some point to lock that number in.
For what?
I thought we signed a contract for fuel at some point to lock that
Yeah,
number.
fuel, but it's a rack price contract. So it's adjusted with the market.
It's like 10%.
I mean, we could play the futures market. I've never heard of any schools doing that. And I'm not recommending that, where you're actually making a contract for X amount of diesel on exit, on X date. But, that's not the way that I've heard of any districts running their energy. And basically what it is trying to make it as taking the padding for guesswork out of the cost and running it close to what it actually
Right,
costs.
yes.
And
And
fuel,
over time, I think that's cheaper.
our fuel increase hasn't been as significant as like our energy, our power bill.
Did the power go up as much? I think PSC overall did something like a 27% increase. Did our
Ours
rates
went up
go up that
about
much?
18%.
Anyway, so I just wanted to thank everyone involved for that, the work that's got to this point, and the continued discipline to get us to that, back to the 5% over time. Recognizing that we want to balance that with still running a viable program. And I think that's the balance that we're trying to strike here. So unless there's other questions, we could go on to the monthly finance report.
I didn't know. I'm in there. Okay. So speaking of enrollment, our June average annual enrollment is 1416.66. Overall, we are down from our budgeted enrollment 5.2% overall. I'm not going to go through all of those numbers, but and this is looking at our actuals for the year. So as of June, our actuals, which again include that K through 12 and our ALE, was 1389. can see, to decline. It's not a lovely picture.
And this is why OSPI and ESD are watching this really closely with us and are recognizing that if this continues, we're gonna need help figuring out how to adjust the budget that you're considering tonight.
No significant changes in the other fund balances. Capital projects, it's at 3.5, debt services 1,300, ASB 372,468, and transportation vehicle is 295. Our general fund revenue and expenditures, June general fund revenues were 1.6 million, expenditures were 2.7. Year-to-date general fund expenditures are 27.8 million and represent 81% of our budgeted appropriations. We've got about 5.2 million encumbered. So we're expecting to spend that. And then these numbers represent 96.27% of our budgeted appropriations.
So if it's 96.27, is the difference then go into fund balance? Or those are expenditures that aren't anticipated yet, but will come?
Those are expenditures that are not anticipated. So
Ever? Or,
in this fiscal year,
so then they would translate into fund balance.
yeah, so essentially we've spent less than we budgeted
Right.
for the fiscal
Right.
year. But we've got a few months to go.
Right, but at this point, you're looking as if we're
That's what those numbers say, yes.
yeah, we're over 3% less expenditure than.
But we've got a lot of cash outs happening in August.
That's
There.
significant.
Yeah. That- And this is just to look at our balance, our fund balance trends by month over the last 3 years. So 25, 26 is the blue. So our fund balance is much higher than the last 2 years in June, as you can see. And I think a lot of that is due to making sure we are claiming our grants, making sure expenditures are happening within the right months. We're not holding on to invoices. We're trying, again, I go back to everyone is working really hard to be focused on getting paperwork turned in efficiently. Just making sure we're closing out encumbrances, so we're not holding on to those encumbrances if we're not going to use them. Just doing everything we can to make sure things are happening as they should. So I'm hopeful. I don't want to get too excited, but I'm hopeful. And then this is just a quick look at our current cash flow. Again, don't get too excited. Months there in yellow are July and August, which haven't been accounted for expenditures and revenues. So, but those are anticipated expenditures and revenues. I think supplies, and again, those are based on historical data. What did we spend in July in the last 3 years?
Mhm.
So we take that percentage and we put that into put that amount into every month. So that's where that 73 million comes in. I think that's extremely high. I don't think our supply costs will be $73,000 in July. So that's good.
No, I'm just kidding.
What, do you think it is going to be?
No.
Are you planning on buying something?
I was gonna make a joke.
Uh-oh.
This isn't the time.
Well, maybe it is now. We'll see, but I think those, there were a lot of supplies purchased in July and August in the past as well. For many reasons, but that's not happening. And that's it for the financials tonight.
Any questions on the?
No.
Nope.
Right, it's well presented, clear for that. So next up, we have a public hearing, open on the 2026-2027 budget. I'm opening the public hearing, seeing that there are no members of the public present, and if no one else wishes to speak public hearing, I will close the public hearing. I will close. So then on to board action items, Mount Baker Resolution 25-2611, adoption of the 26-27 budget. First of all, I'm going to ask if there's any more discussion necessary, or we just went over everything in detail. So if there's no more discussion, I would entertain a motion to adopt Mount Baker or to approve Mount Baker Resolution 25-2611, adoption of the 26-27 budget.
Motion to adopt the Mount Baker Resolution 25-2611.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Great.
So I have a question. While Gatana's here, I know we're gonna talk about the mobile device policy, but then after that, we've got the resolution about the fuel bids. And so I thought as long as she's here, she could give an explanation of that, and then we'll go to the mobile devices and then back to the fuel bids.
So switching B and C.
Or we could just switch them too.
Just switch.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see any problem with taking up. Let's take up Mount Baker Resolution 25-2612, rejecting fuel bids and rebids. So if you want to address that.
Sure, so the lowest responsive bidder's bid would require the district to fuel each bus off-site at a facility that is shared with the general public, which would create operationally, it would be operationally impractical.
We'd have to drive our buses into a gas station
Yes,
and hope we didn't run over anybody.
well,
What you're saying.
yes, and hope there was a spot for us to fuel up at that moment in time. However, due to an oversight with the bid specifics, we did not specify that the procurement was delivery of fuel. So for that reason, state law requires the district to either accept the lowest bid or to reject all bids and rebid the procurement.
With delivery as a requirement.
Correct. So we recommend that the board reject all bids, and we will reissue a new call for bids specifying that the fuel must be delivered to the district's transportation.
Any questions?
I'm just curious, how much money does it save to have to drive your bus?
Well, I'm not sure that it would.
Oh, okay.
So, there's a lot of things that we'd have to consider to drive elsewhere,
Yeah.
which we can go over if you like.
No, I was just curious if.
Well, the
I
price,
mean,
the price per gallon might be less,
Cheaper.
but the time that would be involved for our staff. would be
Paying
greater.
staff to
Paying
drive.
staff to sit in line at the,
How far away was the fueling facility?
I'm not sure if we can.
We can,
Okay.
it's public information, it would be at the
Okay.
Nooksack Market.
Is that public?
Not very hard, it is. Is it public?
Hmm?
Is what public? Are the fuel stations?
Information.
The information is.
Any further questions? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve Mount Baker Resolution 25-26-12, rejecting fuel bids and rebidding.
I'll make a resolution 25-26-12.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Now we'll go on to the, you're welcome to leave unless you want to get involved with the cell phone discussion.
I'll just move back here.
How do you get phones away from children? Okay, Mount Baker policy 3245, student use of personal mobile devices. And I'll start with you introducing it.
Yeah. So this is accumulation of a lot of work that started with our student representatives doing the legwork of finding out what do our staff and our students and some parents, we didn't get a whole lot of parent input, what do they feel about the current, how things are currently being done. And I think one of my major takeaways from their presentation, and I'll let you add anything you want to in a moment, is that there wasn't like a really strong mandate on either side. You know, even students were kind of split over it in a lot of ways and shapes. I mean, so I think that was gave us what we needed to say, okay, so we know we want to make some adjustments, and there wasn't, you know, we're not going to make everybody happy with this, clearly, but at the same time, we're going in the right direction with it. After the student reps did their presentation, our state governor and state superintendent came out and said, these changes are coming to everybody anyway. And so I've had some really good conversations with our principals around what might we want to do with this to get ahead of what the state is going to do. And just so we can be done with it. And then when all those other changes happen, we won't have to worry about it. In June, when I met with the principals, we spent a fair amount of time looking at our current policy, and then the two districts that we ended up looking to as a model is Nooksack Valley School District. They started their stricter policy this last school year. And then North Shore School District we were drawn to that because it had a really good procedure. And that's, you know, you can have the policy, but where the rubber meets the road is the procedure and how it actually gets enacted in the classroom and on campus. And so what you have in front of you is a combination of those two districts with information from our principals. And I'll just go over kind of just some of the highlights of that policy. I think it's important at the beginning that there are these statements about our strategic plan and what we believe about what's important in instruction and how mobile devices can affect that for both good and bad ways. There's also a statement in there about research and what research says about mobile devices and students, and that's something our student reps highlighted as well. Anything you want to say about like what you remember from that, or kind of put you on the spot? But
mostly just that, you know, obviously excessive use of anything, but especially cell phones at a young age is not good for children. What we obviously added into that is, you know, high schoolers are different from elementary kids and middle school kids and so on. And so they'll have different needs and we'll probably have different guidelines just because that is how we accommodate a modern student while still making sure that they have like all the capabilities without the distractions to be able to learn what is needed.
And the really important part is that kind of instructional time and making sure that all students are getting that in-depth instructional time without any distractions.
And not even just limited to like instructional time, but also just like human interaction, because we want to maybe not raise the road, but help develop and like create good, not just students, but people who go out into the world and be just a good representation of maybe not just Mount Baker, but of themselves, because ultimately they step out with their own face and want to make sure they put a good foot forward.
Thank you. So, so here are some of the highlights of that policy. It does spell out what we mean by mobile devices. You'll notice we're changing telecommunication devices to personal mobile devices. And this includes smartphones, but we're also talking about smart watches and smart glasses that are coming into fashion. Earbuds, headphones, tablets, and also leaving that, who knows what's coming in the future. And so just anything else that might come on the market that might fall in this category. So for preschool through grade 8, that really is an away for the day kind of policy. And so when students come to school, the devices are must be turned off or placed in silent mode and out of sight in a student's backpack. We're not saying they can't have it at all at school. It's just we don't want it out where it can be seen. That makes it really easy for teachers to enforce, because it's not like, well, when is it supposed to be out and when is it not? Grades 9 to 12 is a little bit more permissive. And this is where I think we're gonna have most of our discussion tonight, because we're threading the needle of what do we wanna put into place this school year? And if we're more lenient this school year, are we prepared for any state mandate in a year from now that's saying we need to go further? And so what is that progression? And so the way it's stated right now is that students may use their personal mobile devices before the start of the regular school day and after dismissal. They're not to be used during instructional time. And then right now it says expectations for student use during non-instructional time shall be established in district administrative procedure. And so that's leaving kind of that window out open in terms of what that means. And I'm really interested in hearing direction from the board tonight about how strongly you feel about some of the options that might entail.
So could you kind of delineate the options that you're?
So in the procedure for grades 9 through 12, it says that students in grades 9 through 12 must store devices, including earbuds, in bags or backpacks during classes, passing periods, and all other instructional time. Instructional time includes advisory, teaching or assistant periods, assemblies, and other school events. This is where I've gotten some feedback from our junior high and high school principals, where they're highly concerned about the compliance and the management of that. Do we have enough people in order to police that? And that's where I want to have a lot more conversations around, is this just about compliance? Is this just about catching kids doing bad things? Or is this about changing a culture that, albeit will take some time, and we're not going to catch every kid every time, and that's okay, because I mean, kids are doing things all the time, but when we do see it, are we prepared with a response? And can we be consistent in doing that? That new student support specialist that's been hired at for the junior high school campus, that's an extra administrator type adult who can assist it in this type of management. So I know that when Nooksack Valley High School started their policy last year, let me see. So this is from Principal Durant. He said, in talking with the principal there, he said that they had, for the first month of the policy, they actually had school board members who volunteered to help just be extra adults to help with that, to help establish those expectations. And so maybe that's something that we talk about. I don't know if the board would be interested in that. I know that myself and some of the other administrators would be available for that kind of thing. But once we set the expectation, how do we make sure that we're following through?
So that would be someone who actually takes a hold of a phone and brings it to a lockbox.
Mm-hmm. And that's part of the procedure piece that we'll talk about tonight too. But you know, do we start with a warning? Like if I see you with your phone out and I ask you to put it away and you do, I think that's we need to talk about, is that good enough in that moment? Now, if it's a kid who's being told to put their phone away by every other adult that they see throughout the day, that's a different issue. But One of the things that, questions that the principals have asked the board to consider is, we have a very open campus, so, you know, with students walking around between classes, do we want, you know, how much do we want to try to enforce at that time? With lunches, and maybe the students can speak to this a little bit. You know, some students eat in the cafeteria, but then they're also spread out, as well. So, and that's where I don't think, I mean, we could hire 10 more people, and we still wouldn't have enough to catch every student who makes a poor choice with their device. So again, we can't just focus on that enforcement piece, it's also the culture shift side of this as well.
Does NUCSAC prohibit taking the phones out at lunchtime
Yes.
for high school?
Mhm.
Is there a bell to bell thing?
So the way that this, and I should have started, this is a true first reading. So we're gonna get your feedback here tonight. I'm gonna take it back to the principals again before this comes back to you on the 13th. Or hopefully a second reading, and maybe you won't be ready at that time, maybe you will. But when I think about, you know, my work as a principal and a supervisor of students, like I actually think like lunchtime seems like a more appropriate time to be able to have that tech break. Versus if I've got students which are passing time, 3 minutes, 5 minutes?
5 minutes.
5 minutes between classes, and I know that that's the only time that I can take my cell phone out, I'm sure probably going to take advantage of that a little bit more, which might increase the number of tardies. So, you know, unintended consequences there, you know, if I know if I just wait till lunch, then I can use my phone, maybe I'll be more likely to keep it put away. The main thing that I'm concerned about, and this is more from a superintendent level, is when there are issues involving students using their phones inappropriately, it's often in the restrooms. And I actually haven't had any experiences of that here, so I know this isn't a reflection on Mount Baker, but when students are able to bring their cell phones into bathrooms, whether they're using it for communication that they shouldn't be having, or they're taking pictures of things that they shouldn't be taking pictures of, I want to really make our restrooms a cell phone free environment, which is why I personally would be more in favor of a ban during passing time. But that again we need to kind of hash through how strongly the board feels about that and how we can support our administrators in enforcing that.
Has the state issued sort of preliminary concepts of what the state cell phone rules will be?
Mostly just the idea that it's away for the day. I don't know if even having it out at lunchtime will pass muster in the end, but.
I wonder, when is a student gonna have the opportunity to rearrange their transportation? Those kind of things.
There are phones in classrooms and there are phones in the office.
There'll be what?
There are phones in classrooms and there are phones in the
Okay.
office.
So you can use an actual phone with a copper wire.
It won't
know the voice is
Yeah, they won't know the phone numbers, but they can use it.
We used to have those, you crank them.
Yeah.
Another concern that was brought up by the principals is just how are we going to, and you can see it in the procedure a little bit, like what is the confiscation process? So the policy clearly says that if you bring a device onto school property, it is subject to search, it is subject to seizure. And so if that's something that you want no part of, don't bring it to school or don't have it out. We would still be following all of the board policy around student searches. So it's not like it would be in its own special class. And the other thing was searching phones. Like if I were to take your phone, good job.
I know, it's always back there.
You know, even if I had it as an administrator, the chances that I'd be able to unlock it or, you know, having it, that would be pretty slim. So, and really, if we want to avoid power struggles with students over these devices. And so if the student says no in terms of handing it over, it's no longer about the phone, it's about defiance. And we have policy and we have procedure around student discipline definitions for that. We just have to get good at following it and be consistent and not turn it in, like I said, into a power struggle.
I have some thoughts. Well, first of all, we could probably acknowledge that the policy is moving in a significantly more strict manner compared to what we had in the past. I totally agree with the K-8 policy. I think that's great, reasonable. On the high school policy, I agree with the no in the classroom is enforceable. My concern about no cell phones during passing period is that it's very chaotic as the students move around, and we do have the open campus, and I feel like the enforcement is going to feel not fair, and it's going to be everyone's going to say, well, they got away with it, they got away with it, they got away with it, and it's that's going to be tough. I'd rather, and it might muddy the waters with regards to no cell phone in the classroom, where that actually is a higher priority. So what might make sense is just a really strong enforcement in the classroom that, like, hey, you walk into the classroom with your cell phone out, it's being taken away, or if you pull it out, it's being taken away. Just have that really clear, consistent approach. And that, I think, is going to feel more fair to students because there's an actual reason. Like, you're in the classroom, you're there to learn. Like, when you're in passing period, it's harder to justify that. And I get the concern about the being late and tardy, but that should be enforced as well. Like, you know, you're being given a privilege here. Let's have very clear guidelines. You have to show up to class on time, and the phone has to be.
I agree with that on that. The classroom, I do 3 to 5 minute passing time. I would be interested to see if actually there's no data for it, but our tardiness is in the past, if it was anyway cell phone related. Right? And I mean, you'd have to be pretty quick, right? And if it's chaotic and you're on your phone, but there is that time to have it. Lunchtime, I think they should be more than able to use it during that lunchtime, for if a program got canceled after school that they found out about, or somebody else was picking them up that their parents text them about, or something like that. Like, I do agree with, I think lunchtime it should be able to be used, but I get both ways of the going to class back and forth. I mean, it's 5 minutes. I kind of see, just go to your next class. Don't worry about your phone. But then also, our campus really hard to police, and that is going to be one struggle, right? You're going to get guys like, oh, if we go over this way where we know the teachers aren't going to go, then they're going to be late. Or if you just let them go meandering the way that they should go, they wouldn't be late possibly. So there's a lot to think about on that one for sure.
Very good.
I'm fine with lunch.
Yeah.
That's really clear to me. I think that a lot of parents communicate with their kids during the day about things like rides and pickups and sports and ride home with your brother or your sister. And if they know that there's a time of day where they can message their kid and their kid's allowed to respond, that helps give them that peace of mind. Like, okay, yeah, I can't message whenever I want, but I can at 11 o'clock to noon or whatever that lunch period is for their student, right? Then they know, and the student knows that that's when that exchange could happen if necessary. There might need to be caveats, like if the student needs to contact their parent at 2 p.m., are we, I mean, like you said, there's phones in the rooms, but you've got a kid saying, oh, I got a text from mom, and you know, what are we gonna, we should probably anticipate that that will come up and have thought in the procedure that I don't know what the answer is. I would wanna see how our students handle the responsibility of the passing period. I suspect that there will be students who struggle with it. And those students may be some of the same students that struggle to get to class on time for other reasons right now. If there's an increase in challenges that lasts through the whole school year during passing period, maybe we revisit that. But I do think that Ed is right, that the instructional time is the thing to protect most clearly. I think lunch makes sense as a get your tech fix or have your planned communications happen during that time. And you know, when we observed, and it was junior high, and I think it was it breakfast? Were we in there for breakfast?
Yeah.
I thought we would see more students on their cell phones, and we didn't. So, I mean, maybe we're imagining that young people can't handle a responsibility that a good majority of them could. I have no doubt that there will be students that struggle. But I wonder if the majority of them can handle that responsibility. With my parent hat on and my educator hat on, I think high school is a good opportunity for us to help model good boundaries and self-monitoring around cell phone use that can serve them well as they move on to whatever future steps that are beyond us. And so zero tolerance for high school age, I don't know if that serves them 100%. I think we want to protect that instructional time because we know that it makes an impact on learning. But learning how to manage a device and competing things, that's coming for them when they turn 18 anyway, right? So I'm a little more practical minded. And then I'm going to just toss out the elephant in the room. With the superintendent, state superintendent, and the governor talking about cell phone bans, that will become politically charged. And I think we are a politically divided community. And if we can roll this out before it becomes politically charged, that might be a good thing. I'm not sure. I don't have a crystal ball there. But I think our motivations as a board and our students reps who started work on this is about protecting instructional integrity and helping our students get the best outcomes possible. And I want that to be the center of the conversation, and not where it might go in the next year or so as that unfolds at the state level. And we may have no choice.
Well, the way that the proposed policy is written, so under that grades 9-12 section, the language, the expectations for student use during the other non-instructional times shall be established in district administrative procedure. That allows for that leeway. And, you know, even if we did make a mid-year change, it wouldn't require a policy change. It would be a procedure change.
So that gives you that flexibility to say, how is it going? Are the students handling that? Are we spending too many hours seeing it that we can't? But I do think that you're right. We shouldn't avoid a culture shift or an expectation or a policy just because we think it's going to be hard to enforce. Maybe we know we have plenty of rules and policy that we know students are going to veer away from. That we can't perfectly enforce, but if we see it, then I think you address it. But I do have some questions about the passing period that I think make it trickier. So I'm pretty clear in the classroom, no go.
Yeah.
I suppose there could be exceptions if the teacher wanted students to have their phones out for an instructional purpose, not as a reward, but for some sort of instructional purpose, like let's take out our phones and analyze them or something, I don't know.
The other thing to remember, and I know Chromebooks aren't great at everything, but one of the concerns was, well, what about our like our newcomer multilingual students who need to translate things? Why can't they use their phones for that? And my answer is they have a Chromebook that also serves that purpose. So I mean, it might not be as slick as a full app, but it can still do those things. And so I think we need to lean into these devices that we've invested heavily in, and it can do a lot of the things, not all, that phones can do.
Right, in terms of the passing times, I have a question for you two. Have you ever used a phone where you hold it up against your ear and actually talk into it? Do you know about that?
You mean these?
Yeah, like a
Not
cell
these,
phone
these.
where you actually talk as opposed to just texting. You never have?
I've helped kids use them, because phones
You
are out.
saw some weird kids talking on the
No,
phone?
they came into the office and they were like, "Can I use your phone? How does it work?" I've helped. But no, usually, I mean, if anything, a student will come into the office and go, "I'm gonna use my phone to call or text," or "I've already texted." There have been a lot of situations in which the office can't call the actual student and they just tell the parent, "Hey, can you call them on their cell phone?" That's a reason, right? That's a reason for passing periods and stuff like that. If the bell's rung and kids are out and you can't really get on the intercom and get a kid, they have personal devices that will call them immediately, right? Things like PE and stuff like that. Sometimes we can't, we don't know exactly what PE is doing in that scenario. And so things like Apple Watches come in handy, or texting them. I don't know if they have their phones during PE, but I think they leave them. Listen, kids are smart. Tuck it in your pocket and nobody knows.
From experience.
No, of course not. Why would I ever do that? So, I mean, I think phones are more useful in that situation. Maybe that shifts with this policy, but I think most of the time students would just come to campus and use the phone that they already have, that has all their contacts, so they don't have to memorize their numbers yet. So that would be that.
Texting is a little harder to do walking. That's why I asked it.
Not a voice to text.
Yeah, you
My
might
voice
like
is
to
actually, it's like,
Maybe for those of us born in the 1900s.
Yeah, maybe I'm just, it's like me, I have to look at when I'm typing, so if I can't see the letters, I
My
can.
autocorrect saves me each and every time.
Right.
Really.
So I guess, so if I understood your thoughts right, the value of having no cell phones at lunch is for students to form connections with each other.
Which I will say,
Baker's already pretty good
Baker's
at that.
good. I've sat and I've watched like the passing periods and the times in which we are allowed to have our phones but don't usually, and lunch is a great one. I don't see many phones. I honestly don't. There's a lot of great conversations happening in the cafeteria outside and also during passing periods. Like I have walked, and while I'm walking, listen, I was on my phone when I did this, but I put my phone away and looked around, and honestly, not a lot of them are on their phones. They're actually helping each other get to class. There'll be times when I'm waiting for this one to get to class. And so, I think that helps with the socializing, is that Baker's pretty good at not being on their phones, unless something comes up, right? Unless you need to communicate with a parent, or any sort of scheduling differences, right? Unless there's something that kind of comes up. I have a lot of notes about passing periods, not because I'm like particularly in favor of having phones during passing periods, but I see the value in it. As a student who's done passing period, I use my phone every time. I either use it to schedule meetings with her. She misses them. I either use it to talk to a parent real quick. Hey, you're picking me up for this appointment. Oh, this appointment got changed. Some of those medical concerns, like you have a lot of doctor's appointments, so, those things that change really easy, or you get phone calls from someone and you just need to text real quick. I have a little sister who's going into Kendall, and there are some scheduling differences when that comes because my mom works and my dad works, and so sometimes we won't be able to pick her up when we want to. So getting text messages like that, like, hey, I need to pick up the kid today, or you need to pick up the kid, or I have this, right? Things like that for passing periods, it's about timing. Sometimes that 5 minutes is the 5 minutes I need to just take. This needs to happen, or you need to know this. As well as kind of what you were talking about, the 5 minutes is enough time. I've done it. 5 minutes is enough time to get to each class. But the question I have is whether we're putting our phones away from bell or from entering the classroom. Because you were talking about as soon as you enter the classroom, there is no phone. There's a lot of time that I've had, mostly with classes being so close, is that 5 minutes I get in the classroom, I set up, and I still have time to be on my phone. So whether I receive a text message or, I got this meeting, or hey, I have to do this, while I'm in the classroom and the bell hasn't rung yet.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the last year was put your phone away when the bell rings. So a lot of teachers' policies is put the phone away as soon as the bell rings.
Oh, that makes sense. Otherwise you have kids congregating outside.
Right. Otherwise, I'm sitting outside of your door, and that can be tardy, right? Some teachers are very strict. If the bell's ringing and you're outside,
Yeah,
you are
okay,
not
I
there.
wasn't thinking about that, but
Yeah.
yeah, the bell makes sense. It's a,
So you have maybe a minute if you're quick.
Yeah.
Where you're in the classroom, but the bell hasn't rung.
I've had a few minutes. I've had a few long minutes of Candish.
I think my point is I also treasure students having a chance, because this is their time when they get to know each other. This is where they form lifelong bonds, and also learn how to interact with people on an actual one-to-one personal basis. And my sense is that students overuse the devices outside of school. They already have too many hours where they're and I think schools could be a refuge to foster a child developing into an adult. And because we're losing those opportunities for human interactions as we get, and it's frustrating to be with a bunch of adults and all they're doing is not even, they're not interactive. There's no space to it because they're always, it's on the phone and so I get what you're saying in terms of the culture of the school. Lunchtime, to me, the culture is more valuable than the passing time. Passing time, you say hi and smile, but you can say hi and smile while you're texting. But to actually have a conversation, sit down with someone, I mean, that we'll see what the state says too, but I mean, that would be my tendency is, and then you've got enough time during some of those passing times to get that essential, hey, I'm gonna need a ride text across. And then you can't really count on verbally calling a parent from a telephone and having them answer it. As a text is much better for making, those kind of, I need a ride at 2:45 type of communications. And for an emergency call, like you say, you can use either the phone, or if you need to text in the middle of it, maybe even something like going to the office to text. You won't get it taken away. If you go, you can't do recreational texting that way. It's not gonna happen. But well, I shouldn't say it's not gonna happen. but it's not gonna be sanctioned, I guess. And I'm glad this is first reading. because we're feeling a way out, and I think that giving enough leeway in the procedures will give that, your ability to phase in the implementation. The first month, warnings only, say. If this were fully implemented, your phone would be in the lockbox. Or however long you feel you need it, but that gives you a chance to kind of adjust on the fly.
Well, everything that I'm hearing us talk about, honestly, is procedure. From this conversation, I'm not, and correct me if I'm not catching something, I don't see anything in the policy that goes against kind of where I hear the board and the students. All it says, I'll read the 912 again. Students may use personal mobile devices before the start of the regular school day and after dismissal. Personal mobile devices shall not be used during instructional time. Expectations for student use during other non-instructional times shall be established in district administrative procedure.
Yeah, that's pretty straightforward. Any other things that you two wanted to add?
I think honestly, just like circling back to the whole socializing thing, I think like we said, just from like what we've observed as being Mount Baker students for a while, is that Mount Baker students do like talking to each other. Half the time, sometimes the only reason some students come to school is so that way they can spend time with their friends, because it might be the only way they can, maybe their parents, not the type of parent to drive them to go hang out at the mall or something. So school might be the only place where they can do that. And so I feel like they really treasure that time with their friends. I know I'm not hanging out with this person every single day outside of school. So while we're in school, I'm gonna enjoy a good, loud conversation at lunch, and my phone will be somewhere in my pocket, or it'll fall out of my pocket and it'll fall into the phone. I'll be like, I'll get it later, because I'm just so like emotionally invested in whatever we're talking about. And I've seen so many students do that even, maybe they're on their phones, but what they're doing is they're all talking to each other as they're playing a game. So they're talking, hey, you go do this, you go do that. And so even in some way with modern technology, they're finding a way to connect with each other in person.
I will say, one of the funniest examples is that we like talking to each other so much, we made a doc, and we saved it to each other, right? So we have each other's emails on it, so we can talk on our Chromebooks during class. Yeah,
Very
I'm not
old
proud
school,
of it.
honestly.
Yeah, I'm not proud of it. We were talking, but that level of socialization, we enjoy.
During class, you're saying?
During class. Well, listen, I got my work done.
And I'm not pulling out my phone.
And I'm not pulling out my phone.
Getting handcuffs out now.
Finding other ways.
Right, and I think that's gonna happen with this policy, and somebody's gonna find a different way. I think that kind of goes with the procedure and how we enforce it in such an open campus. There's always gonna be a way. It's how it is. Kids want to be on their phones, but I think that the value in that is that we find ways to talk to each other even when we can't.
And I think that's kind of like maybe even like a more important thing that we kind of learned from this, is that kids want to talk to each other. The fountain that they used to do it and the method that they used to do it might differ from time to time. It might be a phone, it might be face to face, might be through a school issued Chromebook, but they'll find a way to talk to each
You
other.
might have to pass a note.
I was gonna say, that's
Well, attach it to a dart.
But I don't think that in Mount Baker socializing is a
Big issue. I think exactly like kind of what you said, just crack down on instructional time, because that is where I think we need to spend most of our efforts. I've seen kids use their phones in the back of a classroom, and in my head, I'm just like, could be using that to do your work, and then you're gonna say I didn't have enough time to do the work, but here you are on your phone not doing the work. And so then obviously the biggest issue and then the most important focus is the instructional time. Just making sure that, hey, once that bell rings, that phone goes in your backpack and you are locked in on what the teacher is saying, and then after that, locked in on whatever they have assigned to you and do that work. So then you make good use of your time, and then you actually hopefully learn and retain what you were being assigned. And even the teacher feels respected. And you see a kid on their phone and you're trying to teach, you gotta feel a little bad, like they're not paying attention to you when you're putting effort into teaching them something that would hopefully be valuable.
And then to add on that, one of the things that we kind of looked at when we were looking at the free time and a lot of students are like, well, I should have my phone when I have free time and when I'm not doing homework. And I think one of the benefits to having the phone away for that instructional time is that number one, if you have free time, you have time to get your homework done. Anything that you need to get done real quick, you have that time. And that socializing, like I remember DeRocco's class where she would give us the free time to get your work done. You had the free time. Now you had to be quiet because other people were working, but she had pods and stuff that we play in the corner. There was always a big group of boys in the corner being loud with dinner cards, and that's socializing with the phone away, right? That's time. Not to keep going back to the passing period, but you mentioned bathrooms and tardiness. I will say I think a lot of the tardiness goes with the bathrooms during passing period, and I don't know whether I don't know whether that is phone use, but that's what I would assume during is allowing that time to, like, if they know they want to be on their phone, they can go on their phone in the bathroom and just, it's in the bathroom for 5 minutes.
Then like, were you really?
But were you really?
Yeah.
But generally, most of those people come back within 1 to 2 minutes of the bell. Because they have that 5 minutes in the bathroom and then they come back to the classroom. So it's not a lot of time wasted.
But it's obviously the thing is
It's
it's
a
still
target.
time, and we obviously want something bell to bell strict, so that way we can make sure there's really no confusion about something like this. And I guess it really is, the policy is good because like it allows that leeway for like, oh, we try something out, doesn't really work out. Okay, we can pivot and then see how we can, modify procedures maybe to better fit how we like manage our like this situation with our students. And so I think like Ms. Shank said that all that we're bringing up and that we all seem to bring up is very procedure related. But I think it's good to a certain extent because then that way we can really hammer out the details of, okay, what do we as student reps think from what we see on the average every day? And then what do you as adults see and like your perspective on that?
Well, I think we've covered this pretty well for the needs for our policy. As Jessica reminded us, the policy is pretty general. And so we basically accept policy for first reading, and then we will touch back again probably at our next meeting. So we can get this in place before the start of the school year.
Yeah.
So the next up, get my right one here. Upcoming events, regular meetings, so we have August 13th, August 27th, and then our board retreat, August 5th, 9 to 2 p.m. Are you two able to come?
I took the day off.
I'll be able to go in the afternoon.
Okay, afternoon, okay. And then at the
I have it on my
August
calendar from
12th.
9 to 2, is that right?
What's that?
9 to 2? Okay.
Yeah. On the 5th,
Yeah.
yeah. And then August 12th at 5:30 p.m. This is Mount Baker High School, so it's not here.
No, it's gonna, we're anticipating perhaps a fairly large group, so,
So
multiple,
it's the auditorium,
yes.
okay.
It'll
And
start with a catered dinner in the cafeteria that the tribe is, gonna bring. And then we have an OSPI representative that will do the, presentation in the auditorium. And it should be a good evening.
Wait, what date is that?
August 12th.
August 12th.
okay,
I don't have that, sorry, what time to what time?
I think the dinner is gonna, the actual, training is 5:30 to 8:30. There will be an optional dinner if you want to join just prior, probably at 5.
Okay.
great. So we will recess an executive session for, so still 60 minutes?
We'll say that so we don't have to add time, but hopefully we can
60
not
minutes
take all
to
of it.
discuss performance of public employee. No action will be taken following executive session. We'll sign our documents now before we recess. Thank you. We're glad to have some experts.
It's not.
Oh,